What you're about to hear may challenge your varying. You believe this is one, oft most shocking, exotic pet attacks in American history, October 29th, Grant County, Oklahoma, at a quiet roadside sanctuary, nestled deep in rural farmland. A man's final moments unfold in chilling silence, broken only by the low, steady growl of a beast he once called family. 67-year-old Charles Chuck Mock, owner of Lost Creek Animal Sanctuary, lies lifeless inside the tiger enclosure, his neck torn open, his ribs shattered, his body ravaged with brutal claw marks. There are no cries for help now, no struggle, only the rhythmic breath of Thetagar looming over him. But this isn't some wild predator from a distant jungle. This tiger was hand-raised by Chuck, fed from his palms, groomed with his bare hands, trusted like a lifelong friend. It was tame until the moment instinct turned. This is the harrowing tale of a man who devoted his life to wild animals and paid the ultimate price. The ultimate press. What truly happened inside that cage? Was it a tragic, unforeseeable accident, or something far more inevitably with us as we uncover the chilling truth behind one of the most disturbing exotic pet attacks in American history? And if you believe animals like tigers don't belong in backyard cages, be Soreto-like, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. You won't believe what investigators found of Charles Chuck Mock wasn't the kind of man you'd expect to find raising tigers at 67. He was soft-spoken, lived by the slow, steady rhythm of rural Oklahoma life. But behind that quiet presence burned a deep, lifelong fascination with exotic animals, especially big cats. Majestic and after Mazenderstack wasn't just an animal keeper, he was a believer. He saw wild creatures not as threats, but as misunderstood souls deserving of empathy, dignity, and a home. Founded the Lost Creek Animal Sanctuary on the vast plains of Grant County, Oklahoma, far from city lights, crowds, or press. It wasn't a tourist trap. It wasn't for profit for Chuck. It was personal, a refuge for creatures, moss-fed, lions, guggers, and, yes, tigers. To those who knew him, Chuck was a gentle spirit. One neighbor remembered him as a man who saw beauty where others saw danger. In an interview the Enid News and Eagle, a local friend shared, Chuck wasn't reckless, loved those animals more than anything. He treated them like family head, spent hours inside the enclosures feeding, cleaning, watching, sometimes just sitting in silence. It was a bond Fu could understand, but one he fiercely dented. In Grant County's close-knit farming community, Chuck was known as Aquiot Private Man, but he was also known as the man with tigers behind his fences. Some were uneasy, others admired him. To Chuck, their sanctuary was a second chance for both himself and the animals he welcomed in. But as the tragedy would prove, their airlines between love and danger, threshold never be crossed. Lost Creek Animal Sanctuary sat far out in the open plains of Grant County, tucked away at the end of a gravel road, far from highways, and even farther from regulatory oversight, surrounded by rustling weed fields and endless blue sky. The sanctuary didn't look like a place harboring some of the world's most dangerous predators, where no signs, no ticket booths, no visitors, just a scattering of chain-link cage, makeshift wooden pens, and home-built fencing, crafted with care but not always be the book. This was Chuck Mock's world, a quiet, isolated patch of land where heckled care for his animals in peace. Thath kept lions, tigers, and cougars, manna rescued from shuttered roadside zoos or surrendered by overwhelmed private owners. The enclosures were basic but functional, according to a 2009 report from the Grant County Sheriff's Office. Their sanctuary wasn't subject to routine federal inspections like many private animal collections in rural America. Official oversight was minimal, if not entirely absent. There were no full-time staff, no emergency barriers, tranquilizer systems on site. As Wanibor told local reporters, Chuck did everything himself. Feeding, cleaning, repairs, didn't want help, and he never asked for it. To some, that kind of self-reliance was admirable, to others it felt like a disaster waiting to happen. Sanctuary's remote location gave Chuck the quiet he valued, but it also meant that if something ever went wrong, help would be miles and many minutes away. Behind the fences of Lost Creek, Danger was never far. It waited just one mistake away, and on October 29, 2009, that mistake finally came to Chuck Mock. Tiger wasn't just a wild animal, he was family, an adult Bengal tiger weighing over 500 pounds, raised by Chuck from the time it was a cub. Chuck bottle him, played with him, cleaned us enclosure daily. He spoke of Thetic as if it were a misunderstood agent. With a loyal heart he trusted that an animal one, locale told the Oklahoma. After the attack, it was like raising a big cat with the personality of a dog, and in many ways the tiger seemed to honor that trust. There were no documented incidents, no prior aggression reports to those close to the sanctuary. The tiger was mild and most dangerously of all time, but two experts in exotic wildlife. That calmness was exactly what made the situation so dangerous. No tiger is ever truly domesticated, a USDA spokesperson warned in 2009, not in a cage, not even after years of care. Wildlife professionals have long stressed tigers are apex predators. Their instincts are deep, primal, and can emerge without warning, even hand. Tigers can lash out over small disruptions in routine environment or midsummer times, with deadly results. Chuck raised his tiger alone without zoo protocols, trained staff, or often less no reinforced gates, no tranquilized within reach. Just a man, a tiger, and a bond built on unshakable trust, a trust that would shatter in seconds best, no matter how much love Chuck gave the tiger. Remained what nature had said it to be, a wild animal ruled by wild instincts. It was a Thursday morning like any other rat. Lost Creek Animal Sanctuary's sky above Grant County was clear. The breeze soft the wheat fields around Chuck's land stretched quietly in every direction. For Chuck, mornings followed a routine. He rose early, always he walketh perimeter with a faded clipboard in only hand and a chipped coffee mug in theater. He checked locks, inspected fence lines for damage, paused at each enclosure, whispering to animals like greeting old friends. By 8 o'clock a.m. he had already cleaned Thalion's pen. He'd laid out raw meat for cougars. His movements were steady and hurry. Drysts wasn't just work to him, it was his purpose. Then came the tiger, the big cat paced at the back of its enclosure waiting. Chuck approached with the same confidence he'd shown for years, no hesitation, second thoughts, no call for help, no observer, no safety lockout. He slid the cage door open and stepped inside. In that silence something shifted. A routine turned into rupture. A familiar morning became Chuck Mock's final one. Chuck had just stepped into the tiger's enclosure. A space hen, like the back of his hand. A food pail rested in his left hand, a metal rake in his right. His movements were calm, deliberate. To Chuck, nothing about that morning felt unusual, but to the tiger, something had shifted. Happened fast for anyone toast up. As Chuck turned his back, likely for just a moment, to begin raking the cage floor, the tiger lunged. No warning, no growl, no hesitation. With terrifying force, the massive cat sank its jaws into Chuck's neck and shoulder. Its fangs tore through skin and muscle like tissue paper. The first strike knocked Chuck to the ground. Before he could even call out, the tiger pounced, pressing its full weight, over 500 lb, onto the man who had raised it from a cub. The struggle was brief. Tiger bit again, this time into Chuck's upper torso, crushing ribs. and dripping through soft tissue, the air was filled with the sickening sounds of a predator's attack, the dull wet thuds of a heavy body striking flesh, the ragged wasp of air forced from punctured lung. Chuck never stood a chance. Around 10:00 a.m., a relative, some say a family member, occasionally helped on the proper charf to check on him. What they found was a nightmare. Chuck's body lay crumpled in the enclosure, partially covered in straw and blood. His skin was shredded across his neck and chest. His face, palestal, lifeless tiger, stood only feet away, silent, watching. The relative called 911. Immediately, Grant County Sheriff's deputies and paramedics rushed to the scene, but by the time they arrived, it was too late. Kakmak was pronounced dead on sit. A massive trauma to the neck, extensive injuries to the chest and torso, no pulse, no breath. In the official incident report, a deputy wrote, "Subject was unresponsive and bleeding heavily. Tiger was calm, but not secured area. Cleared medical intervention. Not possible. The tiger still inside thin closure was eventually tranquilized." End. Later, euthanized. A man who had spent his life caring for animals died at the jaws of the one he trusted the most in the same cage he had cleaned 100 times. Chuck Mock met a brutal sudden end, and with him died the illusion that love alone can tame. Thrilled news of Chuck Mock's death spread through Grant County like wildfiring, a town where everyone knew his name. The idea that the gentle animal lover had been killed by the very creature Hedard was almost too much to bear. Neighbors gathered in disbelief. Some cried, others simply stood insolence outside the gates of Lost Creek Animal Sanctuary. He stared at the now lifeless property, a place that once echoed with Chuck's steady footsteps and the wild calls of animals he loved. It just doesn't seem real. One resident told the Enid News, "An eagle Chuck loved the animals more than anything. It's hard to believe it ended like this." Investigators from the Grant County Sheriff's Office arrived shortly after. The paramedics' job wasn't just to secure Thessany, it was to determine what happened and what came next. The tiger that had killed Chuck remained inside, quiet, but still dangerously unprecocious. Clush had no choice. Later that same day, the tiger was euthanized. On Satia, spokesperson from the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation's spoke plainly to Reperpersonal matter. "How long you've had them? Exotic animals like tigers are never truly tame. They don't forget what they." The sanctuary was shut down. Medea alone. More feeding routines. More soft greetings between man and beast. Just silence and the low hum of official vehicles parked in the dustin. The days that followed, animal rights organizations across the country seized on Chuck's death. They renewed calls for stricter exotic pet laws, citing Lost Creek as a heartbreaking example of what happens when love for wild animals replaces regulation and oversight. Luckily, the response was one of grief, confusion, and quiet reflection. Some supported Chuck's passion, others questioned why he had ever been allowed to keep such animals without stronger safeguards. No matter which side they were, Onavarian agreed on one chilling truth: it only takes a moment of instinct for a predator to remind you what it truly isn't. For Chuck Mock, that moment was final. His death didn't just stir sorrow, it ignited a national debate about the dangers of keeping exotic animals in private hands. Because in 2009, Oklahoma was one of several states with only minimal restrictions on big cat ownership. Some states had banned private possession of dangerous wild animals outright. Others, like Oklahoma, required a USDA license or proof of basic facility standards. At the federal level, the laws were even more fragmented. There were no unified National regulations for private ownership of lions, tigers, or other apex predators reversed was scattered across a patchwork of agencies unless an animal was being transported across state lines or used in public exhibitions. The USDA's reach was often limited, chucked in sanctuary. Despite how tragic, it was operated within the law. He hadn't broken any major state or federal regulations at the time, but his death exposed a troubling truth. Just because you're allowed to keep a tiger doesn't mean you're equipped to manage one. Chuck wasn't the first case like this, and tragically, he wouldn't be the last. Just 2 years later, in 2011, Zanesville, Ohio would make national headlines. Wiener, private owner, released dozens of wild animals, including lions, tigers, and bears, taking his own life in a single day. Authorities were forced to shoot and kill 49 animals to protect the public. It was a horrifying spectacle and a wake-up call. But Chuck's story had already been a warning. A man with no staff, no safety bar, no tranquilizer systems, keeping apex predators in backyard. Enclosure welfare groups responded with urgency. They pushed for national legislation. Experts testified about the risks not only to the keepers but to neighbors, emergency responders, and the animals themselves. Years later, legislation known as the Big Cat Public Safety Act would be introduced in Congress to close those loopholes and strengthen federal regulation. In 2009, Chuck Mock's death was just one more line in a growing list, a list of preventable, heartbreaking attacks. The law hadn't caught up with the danger, and in the gap between passion and policy, Chuck lost his life. Why would anyone choose to live alongside a creature that could kill them in seconds? Why raise a tiger in your backyard, feed it by hand, step inside its cage, alone? For people like Chuck Mock, it wasn't about thrills, it wasn't about spectacle, it was about love, a love so deep, it eclipsed fear. Chuck saw beauty where others saw danger. He believed that with patience, kindness, and consistency, even a predator could become a companion, and he went alone across the United States. Privacy. Individuals have long kept lions, cougars, bears, even venomous snakes. Not for fame, not for profit, but out of a deeply personal drive to connect with something untomidsome. Call it fascination. Authors see it as control, the belief that taming the wild brings meaning, almost scary, but often it's something far more human. The desire to be understood by something dangerous, and to believe you understand it. In return for Chuck, that bond blurred the lines. His passion blinded him to it. His daily routine made Thetigo's presence feel normal, safe, even comforting. When love becomes routine, and routine replaces caution, danger stops looking like danger until it's too late. He's love enough to tame a tiger or air some instincts simply to ancient Torres. Chuck Mock's story isn't just about a man and his tiger, it's about that nature can be rewritten with affection, that devotion alone can undo evolution. So we ask you, would you trust a predator with your life? And more importantly, world you even realize you were doing? Chuck wasn't reckless, wasn't cruel. He was a man fueled by passion, by a love for animals few could fully understand, in a world where most people turn away from predators. Chuck leaned in, he gave him names, built them homes, and believed it down that they could love him back, and maybe for a time they did. But on October 29, 2009, that fragile belief shattered. His death wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a warning, a painful reminder that the LHT between human affection and animal instinct is razor thin, and once it's crossed, it can't be undone. So we ask again, how many more lives must be lost before we stop pretending wild animals can be domesticated? How many tragedies must unfold before regulation replaces leniency, or safety replaces denial? The truth is, exotic animals were never meant Forkages or backyard she are powerful instinct-drivens, whose needs reach far beyond what even the most loving human can give a chuck. Mock's legacy is complicated. Cared he tried, but in the end his love couldn't protect him. Chuck Loverdis. Animals, but in the end the line between devotion and danger vanished, leaving behind grief, blood, and a warning written in claw marks. Let his story be more than a headline, let it be a turning point, forcefully for awareness, for change. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true stories from the edge of human-animal relationships. And remember, love is powerful, but nature is stronger.